So after a clarifying video, Jeremy, who I responded to yesterday, had this to say.
These tools aren't producing some sort of artifact that then gets shared and discussed so much as the artifact being the conversation itself. And I find that very powerful.
I find this idea so engaging that the conversation could be the artifact, the metadata on top of the content is actually the artifact that's most interesting. And it has a lot of implications for the work that I'm currently doing around blended learning, which is really data-based, and we need to be able to analyze data and that we can provide content that is specifically matched to the learner. And so I keep on thinking about whether or not the data or the metadata is actually more important. So if we're actually collecting all of this data based upon all of the assessment scores and the portfolio of information, is that actually the stuff that we should be looking at in order to differentiate? Or is it really the metadata, the conversation that is on top of that, that is actually the data points, the metadata points, that will allow us to move forward? Is it more the process of reflecting on top of that data and saying, this is where you have been, this is where you are going, let's reflect and let's make some choices? Is that the actual important part? Rather than saying that it is data to drive instruction, should we be saying metadata to drive instruction? And so what would that look like if we were going to focus specifically on the conversation and the metadata on top of the data and say that that is the important artifact, that is the thing that we're actually going to be looking at in order to move the needle? What would it look like to have a classroom that is based upon metadata and to have a classroom where the conversation is paramount? When we look at these types of classrooms and we say that they're inquiry-based or they are discussion-based or they have a Socratic method that is going on throughout, if we are saying that that is the important part, then the data itself becomes just the underlying structure to have that conversation, and to say that we are going to support one another through metadata, that we are going to support each other through the conversation, and the only tools that we choose are the ones that allow for that conversation to happen. And so we can actually filter out all of the tools that only work on the data level and do not provide us with this level of conversation or reflection or the ability to tag or give metadata to the actual assessment data, or if it is a portfolio data. If it is just the learning objects, if it is just the numbers and the data points, then we can filter that out. And I think that's a little bit of what Jeremy was getting at, is that those particular tools around sort of publishing and saying, you know, this is my e-portfolio or this is my score on something, that those aren't as valuable. But it is the spaces and the times where we can use that metadata and that analysis or critique or reflection that will allow us to move forward. So if you have thoughts about how to use metadata to drive instruction or metadata to drive differentiation, please leave it in the comments, subscribe on YouTube, or join us on the Google Plus community for reflective practice vlogging. Thanks so much for watching.